At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
A pleasant good morning, everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am an event coordinator for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Nduro, the regional director, I would like to welcome you all to our Managing Your Business Within a Changing Workforce webinar. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, as well as to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a public-private partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Our mission here is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com. Again, that's www.rnsbdc.com. It's also located on the bottom right-hand corner of our screen. And this website is where you can request counseling. And on the top right corner of our website, there's a button labeled Request Counseling, and clicking on that button will lead you to fill out information, including the help you are seeking with your business. And within 24 to 48 business hours, a consultant will reach out to you for an assessment. For those of you here that are not in Essex County, our other website is www.njsbdc.com, and that is our headquarters website. And on this website, you are able to type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, the audio has been muted for now, and we will be taking questions via the Q&A feature here on Zoom. We do have the chat feature on, but the Q&A feature will help us to remain organized, as well as have all the questions and answered in one designated area. So please feel free to post your questions anytime during the presentation, and we will do our best to respond during or at the end of the webinar. A copy of the presentation slides along with a video recording of this webinar will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours, so you can refer to this information long after the webinar has ended. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today's presentation, Jeannie Rock-Bailey. Jeannie is the president of Rock-Bailey Enterprises, and she is also an SBDC consultant here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark in the areas of human resources management, state and private sector certifications, as well as supplier diversity contracting. And now, without further ado, I will turn today's presentation over to Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Sequoia. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my presentation with you. But before we start, I wanted to know if there were any questions out there about our topic. The changing workforce for our presentation today is really the gig economy. And it affects all of us. It affects all businesses, especially our small businesses. And we felt that it was important for you to have an opportunity to get this information so we can answer any questions that you may have. So before I start the presentation, I just wanted to know if there are any expectations, if there's a burning question, if there's a situation that you may need to address in regards to HR. Of course, we protect the names, but if there is a situation in regards to human resources and managing, not accepting, but including this population into your workforce, please feel free to ask it. Okay, I'll start the presentation. Again, I'm Jenny Rock-Bailey. I'm a human resources consultant and also provide certifications for minority and women businesses and small businesses for the center. The intent of this workshop is basically to allow the participants to understand that yes, this population exists, but there is a clear distinction between the gig population and employees. And that's my overall goal throughout this webinar, is to ensure that everyone who's on understands that yes, the gig economy, the gig workforce is a part of your business, but so many of them are not employees. And there's a big difference because employees get benefits. Most gig workers don't. So as I go through this program with you, I am going to make sure that I indicate those differences. So you know when you have to make those decisions about retention, performance, etc., it's not necessarily the same conversation that you would have with an employee. It's a conversation that you need to have to make sure that the project, the service retained, is accomplished. And that's key in this. Little blurb on me.
Jenny, can you maximize your screen, please?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. No, hold on one minute. Sorry.
Just click on slideshow and start slideshow.
Right,
That should make it from big. Yep, there we go.
Oh, gotcha. There you go. So sorry. So I want to really address the current need for this population and what is the result of that need in terms of titles. The gig population can look like a temp, a contractor, a 1099, an on-call person, or a freelancer. And I'll speak to the slide, but I'll speak to the experience and the information. The gig population by definition isn't new. Gig, when I think of gig, I think of musicians who are so happy to be able to perform their craft in front of someone, knowing that it may not be a long-term gig, it may just be for the night, but they're just so happy that they're able to do this. That's where the definition came from in terms of this population. And also because of the conditions that we find ourselves in right now with the pandemic, and you have employees that are remote, employees that are in, depending on the state you're in, it could be 50% in, 50% out. And from a human resources perspective, not just HR, but from an owner's perspective, you have to manage that group. You have to manage those who are remote and how they're doing their work and what are the bells and whistles that you put in place. You have to manage the group that's on site on those days where they're not remote, or now since we're opening up a little bit more, those are meeting clients. You have to manage those. And when it comes to the gig population, in another kind of way, you're managing them as well. You see the population in terms of positions and occupations. You see a gig employee as an Uber and Lyft driver, people who cart food and passengers in their cars, the healthcare industry, especially nurses and home caregivers, media creatives, IT and retail. But there are key industries that use this workforce. It's recreation, construction, healthcare, retail. They use this workforce because they satisfy an immediate need. And they satisfy a need that allows you as an owner to move your needle. And just giving you examples of what they are, I wanted you to be able to realize as you see the Uber and Lyft driver, they're a part of the gig population. And statistics are showing us that that population has grown. I looked at statistics anywhere from 16% over a period of time to 69%. And it's all driven by our need as small business owners. The generation represents, the population represents these three main generations. And I offer this because this is also the population that's in your workforce. You have baby boomers in your workforce. They're gig employees now, many of them because they want to add on to their retirement package. Many of them because they want to increase their revenue. Millennials because they're wired this way in terms of flexibility. And Generation Z is because that's all they're really going to know. A lot of them will not be full-time employees. And I offer this background because as owners, this is also the population that you're managing now in your businesses. But the clear distinction is how you manage them. So meet the gig worker. Their compensations are usually 1099s, which are miscellaneous incomes, and categorized as independent contractors. They're given a W-9 when they start working with you, and that results in a 1099 at the end of the year. A short-term employee is also a gig worker, but he's a W-2, given a W-4 when he starts, and this short-term employee actually works from a month to 6 months. This could also be your part-time employee, but usually part-timers are brought in to handle a longer period of time, to actually handle a function that's needed in the organization for a designated period of time. What they share though is they share for their need to be flexible. They're changing the way we as owners, because I also own a business, are looking at the labor market and how our companies are using this population to change the way we look at the workforce, to plan for them, and to meet the needs of this workforce, as well as meeting the needs of our own. It's not a new workforce though. As I started out earlier, I mean, I gave the example of a musician, but there's always been a part of the workforce where people chose a position that satisfied their immediate need. The pandemic just made this even bigger because of how it affected the economy, which we all know. So what it's made us as owners do is think about how we handle different aspects of human resources, how we handle different aspects of actually how we're going to run our company. Because there's the need to have a traditional employee. And based on how we're growing our services, how our networking is paying off so that it increases our visibility, makes more people want to know more about us, makes more vendors want to use our product. We don't know how long they want to use our product or how long they want to be a part of us. But what we as owners want is we don't want to lose that business. And in order to provide that service, in order to make sure that we stay on top of our need, we need a population that can work with us. And that's where this gig worker comes in. These workers are concerned about the things that we're concerned about. And so as employers, since they're concerned about, Not in a huge way though, because I don't want to diminish the fact of why they're working with us, but they're concerned about how they're going to fit in to the organization as well, how they're going to be perceived by the traditional workers as well, even though they're there for a short term. They want to make sure that they're accepted and invited because they know that they provide this need. And in so many cases, the needs that they provide pays more than what the traditional workers are making. And as I was talking with a colleague about this earlier, it's that knowledge of them knowing what they're worth and what they're being paid. And it's now the shift in the law, which says that employees can also discuss what their salaries are, what they're being paid with other employees. We, from a human resources perspective and owners, we have to manage those conversations. We manage them because of the cultural impact, the productivity that it will have on the workforce, and also the financial bottom line. And in order to be able to make sure that we as owners meet our goal, we have to stay on top of these things. And as I looked at information, it talked about how we do it, specifically for the gig population. It really isn't any different than how we do it if we're good employers and if we're transparent and open about the way we implement our practices and our policies. Our practices are those processes that we undertake to make sure that we meet our goal. Our policies are policies that we undertake by a commitment to meet our goal. Distinction. But it boils down to more responsibility for the employer or the owner, because this is, in the absence of being on top of these critical points, you can have a disruptive workforce. Not only will the gig worker leave, but some of your traditional long-term employees that have been with you for a while, or that who bought into the fact that this was going to be a career for them. Career meaning satisfy their long-term goals, satisfy their professional goals. You want to make sure that you understand the distinction and your role in making sure that you can pull this off, essentially. The cultural impact looks at, for full-time jobs, but the cultural impact looks at the gig employee who's looking for a full-time job, but needs additional money to support themselves and their families until they find that ideal position or perfect job that meets with their academic needs, professional credentials. That's a goal of theirs. And that's why the cultural impact is so important. Or it's a labor force that don't want to work full time. And sometimes they're considered workers that are working for a lifestyle. And that lifestyle may be to advance their artistic capabilities, work for a number of companies so they can build up more experience to upgrade their gig worth. But as owners and employers, we've got to be aware of this and in our process to make sure that we get the most out of the traditional and the most out of the gig. We have to manage them in a way that in some cases are the same, because it's with respect and dignity and kindness and transparency, and others are to meet their need. And if you know upfront what the need is, then you're in a better position to make sure that you stay whole as an organization and your sustenance is there. The workforce productivity looks like this kind of a pie. If this was a pie, you have full-time, you have part-timers, you have contractors, and contractors fall under a variety of titles. And I opened this up with that. You have 1099s that work with you as as vendors. A lot of them are LLCs. A lot of them are independent, with an LLC is an independent contractor as well, but come to you as a bona fide 1099 that is looking more project-based. You're seeking them also for more project-based. The freelancer is coming in to do a one-on, and you're looking at them for a specific project. The temp, we know our temps come in to full 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. I just hired a temp that's going to be on a project for 6 months. And with that temp, we have a job description because we have a commitment with her and our resource, our recruitment source, that allows us to make sure that there is accountability for the project that she's being hired for by the agency and by our firm. You have on-call people that come in. On-call is as needed. There are also per diems that are part of this workforce productivity. And when I look at this, it reminds me of families. You have all different pieces of a mosaic that makes up your family. And you love and like most of them, but you know that because they're a part of your family, they've got to fit in. You've got to invite them to certain things. You have to make sure that you recognize them. That's your workforce. Your workforce consists of this population of people that have different needs. Some you've given opportunities to, as long as they perform the function, which are full-time. Part-time is as long as they perform a function or a designated period of time. And contractors are there to support a service, a project that you've gotten under any kinds of circumstances at this time that you want to keep and grow with the project and grow with the provider that gave it to you. My financial bottom line on so many things when it comes to making business decisions, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. And that is a hint of how you look at how you're making money. And if how you're making that money doesn't make SE to you, doesn't make sense, then it may not make the dollar amount either. And I say this because this is incorporating these two workforces together also gives you an opportunity to look at how your business model is working for you. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to look at that now, because as the increase in gig workers occur in the workplace in general, in the workforce in general, but in your workplace, I would rather you be on top of the change than trying to fix it as it occurs. And you're on top of the change because you're looking at how the increase of this gig economy is going to affect your current workforce. Because as I said, for larger projects, let's say, larger in terms of need, in terms of the kind of publicity, the kind of increase in your revenue that project can bring to you, you may or are bringing in people to do it that make more than people that you hired full-time. Even though they may not be working on that project, that person may know, your full-time person may know. So again, you've got to be ready to deal with that as well. And in that process, it's not good enough to say it's none of your business, because that's not going to work. And I mean, I'm an HR purist to the extent of abiding by the law and creating the best practices to get employers to do the best they can for their employees. But the reciprocation has to be there as well. And that's making sure that you treat your full-time employees the way you made the commitment, and you make sure that your gig workers are always invited to come back if they meet the requirements of the position that you bring them in. Because as this population grows, what we're finding is, depending on the generation, their expectations from us as owners are the same as when they were employees, except they know that they can always leave because their goal is to be flexible, to meet the demands until I can get a job, or to continue to work in this flexible workforce where they can meet their lifestyle, meet their immediate demands. And if it's the latter, they're meeting them by going from one employer to the next, from one client to the next, because essentially that's what you become to them. And when I think of it from a human resources perspective, without having this knowledge as an owner, I can see where there are some pitfalls that an owner could fall into if you're not ready to not only juggle the many tasks that you have to do as an owner, but to juggle the differentiation in your workforce. So I'm sharing with you this information because my clients have gone through these struggles when it has come to having 50% of your workplace working at home on Mondays and Wednesdays, and the other 50% in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And on Fridays, you bring in that full-time person. It's usually an office manager who's working every day, but is socially distanced, so the organization can still comply with the law. We had to have serious talks about how we implement that mandatory program. Then on top of that, to get a project that you know that's only going to last 2 or 3 months, and you don't want to take your full-time staff away for it, then you introduce a gig worker into it. It takes planning, regardless of what the project is. It takes planning, and it's not, it's a planning where you allow all the parties involved, which would be all your workforce, to make sure that they understand their roles. And it's not that you have to have a group meeting, because you have a group meeting for employees only. You can have a hospitality moment, but if you have a group meeting and want to talk about benefits and employee handbooks and things that are down the road, that's not a conversation that you would entertain with a gig worker who's there to do the job, just to do the job. But it's a conversation that you can have when you bring that gig worker in during their onboarding. You're reminded of informing that person that we understand that you're not a worker, you're not an employee, but we're open here. And you'll have a spot to sit in, or if it's virtual, you'll be a part of meetings that require your input. But there are certain facets of the business, as you know, that you would not be a part of. I haven't met one that hasn't said thank you very much because I'm just here to do the job. But it's not their reaction, but it's your responsibility as an owner to take advantage of that, to take advantage of those moments. Because most of the gig workers or vendors that we've worked with, we've had a contract with them or an agreement with them. So it was clearly delineated what they were supposed to do, how long they were supposed to be there. Sometimes there's not an ending to the date, but there are benchmarks. But we're aware of the fact that even though we go over all of that with them, Their goal is to be flexible. Their goal is to make sure that we understand that they're here for a given period of time. And it's not something that, that I constantly belabor with my clients, but it's constantly a reminder to them, because the longer that gig worker is there, the more he just seems like just anybody else doing a job for us. I'll send you, like a lot of our virtual meetings, we will send Dunkin' Donuts to everybody or Panera sandwiches to everybody. It's not like that person's going to be in a meeting and they don't get the sandwich. We send it to everyone, but we make sure, and I'm harping this to you, you make sure that you understand while they're there and you respect them. And as an employer, as an owner, you want to make sure that that person would want to come back to you if the opportunity presented themselves. Because just like a full-time person who leaves with a chip or leaves with a misunderstanding of why they were let go, a good employer, an accountable owner would not want anyone to leave thinking that there was a communications issue. Sometimes it's beyond, your view to do that, or it's beyond your responsibility to do that, depending on the reason. But if the goal and intent of the organization is to do that for full-time people, for traditional workers, you would want to do it for this population as well. Are there any questions? Okay. So when we look at, first of all, let me make this caveat that with the information that's out there on gig workers, which also gave me more of an idea to do more of this work, it's hard to see how you implement this when you're not in it. But it's even harder to see when the information is based on larger organizations and not solopreneurs or startups or entrepreneurs who are, may just be looking at bringing on a virtual assistant or may just have hired their first person. The information is, to my liking, is not there to the degree that it can provide maybe day-to-day things for you. But if you look at your business, regardless of what your organizational structure is, sole proprietorship, a limited liability, corporation or partnership or corporation, your goals are the same. Whether on the sole proprietorship level and your home-based business, your goal is to generate revenue and make sure that you always present yourself in a very positive light. That's what the goal is here as an owner and employer of a diverse workforce. This is another clear example of what a diverse workforce is. So why do you look for them? Whether it's a one-off or 1 month or 6 months. You look for them because it lowers your labor costs. It also limits overtime. And you have to be careful about that too. If you're targeting a full-time person to limit the overtime by bringing in a gig employee, you have to look at that and want to make sure that that's clearly fleshed out in your mind on why you're bringing that person in. The benefits also are it's flexible staffing that allows your organization to grow. And flexible staffing and growth equals a solopreneur that brings someone on to do a small project that will allow them to do more networking, get them more involved with organizations that can help their business, allow them to project in a community of business owners, whether it's through the local chamber or other local business organizations, because you've covered that day-to-day through bringing on a gig worker. Flexible staffing has always been looked at as something that will allow the owner to do more than what they're doing right now. We did a whole workshop and a series on this, but it's even more pertinent now because of how the economy is. It's how the workforce is. It's how business is being distributed, and how we look at as owners what it's going to look like on the other side of this, and where you're going to be on the other side of this. And if it comes down to the question of how you leverage your personnel dollars, you look at the benefits of either adding on a full-time person or going to that gig worker, regardless of what your organizational structure is. And it's always my recommendation that if that is the case, then you look at the best way of doing it, the best way to recruit for that person, the best way to make the selection for that person, the best way to bring them on, to onboard them. And then after that, you look at, depending on how long they're there, how you fit them into those other categories of your business based on the skill that they offer. The only difference, which is major with this population, is time is not on your side in making all those decisions. You don't have months to recruit. You don't have months to screen and bring them on. You don't have months to do it. Sometimes it's days. So you have to build an infrastructure that will support that process. And that is a major difference from a full-time employee. You want to look at 5 or 6 of them. You want to interview 3 of those 5. You don't always have that opportunity based on your need and based on the availability. And that's why, again, I recommend that if you're looking to increase your population, your workforce population, that you begin to look at your current model and how they can fit in. And even for a solopreneur, if you're looking to increase your services and you're not literally making enough to do that on a whole in terms of bringing someone in full time, because full time adds another whole piece of dollars that you have to put into that full-time person, whether it's benefits, paid sick time. There's a whole host of benefits, workers' compensation, all of those things that you have to, essential benefits, mandatory benefits in some cases, that you have to include in your overall budget that you don't have to include when it comes to a gig worker. But you do have to look when we go back into the office, if we do, or if a part of your staff does, you still have to look at insurance. You still have to look at space. You still have to look at those kinds of things, whether they're every day or they're just coming in for hours. But it still has to be a part of your business model. And you have to look at it like a puzzle and how you can arrange these necessities to make sure that it's going to work for you. And often those discussions shouldn't just be between you and the person in the mirror. You should branch out to organizations, colleagues, even through us at the Small Business Development Center. I have no idea where you're coming from, but I know with this webinar, you get an hour of free consultation with me. And if I saw that I couldn't answer the question, I would definitely reach out to a colleague to help me. But you get that consultation with us because these decisions are too important for you to, kind of third guess yourself. If you're on the second guess, you need to talk to someone. If you're firm in the decision that you're going to make to bring the person in or bring the person on board, then go ahead with it and make sure that you're in a position where you can defend it, because you're responsible for so much of, you're responsible in a sense for so much of their giving you their best by how you treat them. And you're also responsible to your other employees if it's not the right fit, even if it's on a project where it's all virtual and they're not carrying their load. You're responsible to your business to end the relationship. It's a benefit to the owner and to staff, and so often staff is considered full-time or full-time employees, that they're enthusiastic about scheduling options that fit their individual needs and lifestyles. So why is this a benefit for traditional employees? Because they have an idea of when they would have to work with this individual. Because I haven't seen a situation where the gig employee has come in to manage employees. I've seen them manage functions, and I'd have to really have a deep dive with my client who would consider doing that, because we may want to put them in another category. But it's incumbent upon you to make that decision about how they fit in. So it's a benefit to the overall workforce, which would be a benefit to your company. Because I think what's really clear also is that there's no good bad publicity, regardless of who's giving it. Because once the bad publicity is out, there's very little room for them to say, well, I was only there 3 days. I was only there 1 day. The bad publicity carries longer than the person who says it. So you want to make sure that you stay on top of it as well. And it also requires a discussion with, it could require a discussion with your accountant, an attorney, if you felt that there were some questions that you needed to be answered about some observations. So for me, if that was a situation, and believe me, I'm not down on gig workers because I bring them in. If there is a discussion around that, you have to take prompt and immediate action because they're not employees. And that is to sever the relationship, bring them in, ask them what's going on, because you're culpable for so many other employee related issues if you don't do that. So that's the benefit of that workforce. And it's not my intent here to scare anyone. It's my intent to make you a better business owner, totally, especially in regards to the needs of your HR. The major challenges for this population is that short-term contractors can be risky. It can be risky for the business to bring on that person. But how you avoid risk, not all risk, but many risks, is to be prepared, is to make sure that what they're being hired to do is clearly understood by them. And you clearly understand the challenge that they may have to meeting one of the 10 essential functions that you want them to do, or 2 of the 8, whatever it is. You want to make sure that you understand what that may be and how you can get through it. Because the demand for that skill may be so great that will bring you over the top, that it may require you to do more with that person. But the gig workforce can also offer many advantages to you. They can accommodate and foster your ever-changing workforce, because our workforce is not going to be the same. I was also talking to some colleagues of mine about the use of the word normal. I find it very hard from an HR perspective to use that word. It's more changing and addressing and incorporating and designing a new workforce. Um, because I don't want anyone to think that coming back to work for our clients is going to be the same. It's going to be different because we're different. And some of these practices and policies that we've instituted are not going anywhere. So, I mean, I think that's also important for you to understand the need for that, because the more information you share with the people that work with you, that allows them to have a comfort zone of why they chose to stay with you or why they chose to be on this project, the better of an employer you are. And they can say anything else about the trappings, the lunch, anything, but it'll be difficult for them to say, well, he didn't respect him and understand our challenges as well as kind to some of the issues that we're facing, that we're bringing into the workplace. So, I mean, I think that's an example of what your challenges are and how you can be more risk averse if you plan for bringing this population in. Will help you to avoid some of these challenges. But you will also be able to carve out, I think, you'll be able to carve out some new business that you'll be getting with a gig employee so you can see and confirm that it's the business that you want. Because that's important too. As a business owner myself, I don't want to leave $1 on the table. But if that $1 is going to cost me 1,000, then it's worth leaving it on the table. But it's a process that I have to go through. It's a process that we as business owners have to go through. And the benefit of this workforce allows us to see how important it is to even go to one agency over another to get that person. Because I think one of the challenges that employers are having is that they can have 3 flexible workers in their company working on similar or same projects, but come from 3 different agencies and therefore may be getting 3 different forms of payment, which they would discuss. So that's something that you can avoid because you can't stop them from talking about it, but you can look at the agency or the resource that you're getting them from and see what kind of discussions they have about this, because you can't stop it, but you can use that as your decision to bring them on. And that also applies to the whole recruitment, selection, and onboarding process, which I'm gonna give you some more information on later, but it's appropriate to discuss it now because it's important that this population is onboarded. And if you're not onboarding now, then it's important for you to adopt a program that'll allow you to address that will allow you to address the different members of your workforce. Even I have to think about using the word employee because the employee just brings up so many other things for this individual. And most of the gig worker that I've worked with or that my clients have worked with will remind you that they are not employees because they know what is attached to that, maybe from a negative perspective, but they'll, remind you that, no, I'm just here to help Jenny out and get her through this. They are more comfortable in their position and their title than the non-traditionals are with them being there. And you've got to look at that. You have to include that into your decision of bringing one in and who that person is. Are there any questions? No questions? Because I had thought about opening up the mic. So you could just ask me questions as I'm going along. And if that's something that you would like to do, put that in the chat as well. The HR challenges, you know, to build this gig workforce, replace or to complement a more traditional form of employee relations, regardless of, well, for a solopreneur, your employee relations, your benefits, your everything is just you. And you determined to be there because that's the way you want to grow your business. But as you grow, you look at employee relations that you may have encountered if you were ever an employee, and how you would want to develop that and maintain it in your own business. You look at it that way. You look at training and development, you look at policies and procedures, and you look at performance management and many, many more situations that speak to a full-time person, but also address the needs of a gig employee. Training and development, they may need to be trained trained on a part of what you're doing. And that training is identified as, I'll use my example, my company as example. That training is identified as the Rock Bailey way. You've got all the bells and whistles to do this, but I'll train you on the Rock Bailey way. Policies and procedures, you know, you incorporate that into your policies and procedures manual, which is not given to a flexible worker, but allows the workforce to see that this is part of what is considered workforce. And now that I'm thinking about this, I may even change, you know, that section, the title of the section, to be more encompassing for our clients, to include gig workers, but may just use a changing workforce. I mean, that is another reason why I just find these webinars so important and so good for me, because it's got to be understood that our responsibilities as an owner grows when we bring this workforce into our companies, but it also should make us better at our function of being a good employer overall for the people that we hire full time. Because the eye is always on that. I haven't had a situation where a decision had to be made over keeping a gig employee because of an employee, a gig worker, because an employee made a mistake or made a complaint, because I think it was because we were so open and transparent about the growth of the organization and how we had to bring other people in. But it's a conversation that, you know, you may want to have. When it comes to performance management, a major change I see in this for a gig worker is that you do not have time to plan on when it should be. We have, in some organizations, there's 3 months after orientation, there's 6 months because that's halfway through the job, and then there's a year. You don't have that time. So it may be a performance managed situation where you're doing it on a day-to-day basis, or you're doing it if they're there for longer than a week at the end of the week. And it also speaks to the benchmarks that you as an employer establish on how they report on the success of what they're doing for you. I call it performance management to keep the topic the same for the business. But it may depend on just that, because you're bringing them in to do something either you can't do, don't have the time to do, to satisfy the need, but it doesn't eliminate, obviously, your need as an employer, but it also doesn't eliminate your responsibility and accountability to the client who wants it and to the gig worker on making sure that they're doing what's required of them. Because most of many of them that I have worked with are so prideful of what they're bringing to the table. And there's just that hair, that hair is different so often with them being an employee. And so you have to step back and remember that they're not. You know, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for human resources because human resources now has to add another, I hate to say but add another responsibility to make sure that the overall workplace is harmonious. And it takes input from the owner, because areas of concern that you may have had prior to bringing someone on may be exacerbated or may go away, but you don't want to take the chance. If you have a problem employer, you deal with the problem employer before you bring the gig worker on, especially if it's a small shop. That's just best practice HR, because that's just something that you don't have to deal with when the person comes on, and it diminishes your risk because it takes away from you getting the job done. So that's a challenge. So when you look at the requirements, you know, to make the change, and I tried to dissect it into those issues that, you know, we were talking about earlier, or I was telling you about earlier. It's the requirements to make the change is more efficient recruiting process. You know, time sensitivity to sourcing, to hiring, to onboarding in days or weeks, not months. Immediate decisions are required. And so often, which is humorous to me, is so often those time gaps when it comes to hiring a full-time person is because we didn't do the work ahead of time. So even though you have a job description and you want to put it out there, there may be some aspects of the job descriptions that changed since the last part. I mean, all of these kinds of things happen when you bring in a gig worker, but I think that the phrase now is it's on steroids because you don't have that much time. You get the job tonight, you have to find someone. So you have to have your network. You have to build your network, and you build your network in some amazing ways now, because so much is done online. There are so many groups online in different categories that can help you. Just put it out there sometime. And then you have to make sure that your due diligence includes those questions that are going to allow you to make the decision. So they're all open-ended. They're open-ended. They're who, what, why, where, and how. They're not, what do you think about life? And, oh, you don't have that time. And you prepare for that. So your recruiting efforts can meet your demand. Again, the performance management, training, and development, it must shift for this population. And I hesitated to use the word irrelevant, but I wanted to make sure that you understood how important the process is, and how even the word annual, when attached to this, is relevant, obsolete, it's just non-existent. So you have to look at more results-oriented objectives, which requires more time, but it's all a part of your preparation. And this is for all owners who are looking for gig workers. It has nothing really to do with your organizational structure. It has to do with your need to get who you need, which has to do with your want to get who you need to satisfy this immediate project. And with that want and desire, it takes preparation. So it's like I'm suggesting that after this webinar, you go out and start working on these things if you haven't brought anybody in. But I'm suggesting that you tweak it to make sure that it meets the requirements for gig workers in a few categories that you may need them in. That you develop, if you could, a template, because that would diminish your time. If you had a template, that would allow you to do that. And often with a non-traditional, with a traditional worker, not nobody. Many managers don't want to do employee evaluations because it's just so time consuming. What does it really mean? And what are we going to do about it if they're better? And on and on and on and on about completing the form. Forget about talking to the person. If they don't even want to complete the form, what I'm suggesting with this population is that the conversations are everything. You have to talk to this person. And it's got to be ongoing until they say, Apple, I can't take it anymore, I'm leaving. No, but it has to be that way. It has to be to the point where when you're driving home and you're going over your day and the responsibilities that this individual had, you can say, check mark, oops, whatever it is. You want to be in a position where you know that the conversation was had about the progress and the accomplishments, as well as work that needs to be done. Because they're not there for annual reviews. And so that's another reason why human resources in general has to look at our language and make sure that if you're going to have a category under performance management, you're going to have a definition for traditional part-time gig workers. You're going to have to include functions that are in your organization to make sure that this topic is up to date. Because it's got to be all inclusive. It's got to include everyone. Retention is another one. Workplace atmosphere that is conducive to a flexible worker, so they return if needed. I mean, I think that's the key. When we look at retention and turnover, it is so different when you speak to this population, because the flexible worker, it's not that the turnover statistics that you may keep, regardless of what size of the organization you have, you should look at it, because that's where some money is going out the door. But you have to look at the fact that retention for this worker may mean that you want them to come back because their work was so good. There are different expectations for a full-time employee when you talk about retention. So this is just another example where the language has got to be treated as well. It's not easy to manage, but may be necessary to maintain your business, because it's where these differences occur that affect your that can affect your bottom line. And you just want to make sure that when questioned about the atmosphere, not even question, when you review the workplace atmosphere, that it's on the high for you. And it's a survey that you can mentally do every day, that it's on the high for you. Because just like we are dealing with full-time traditional employees who are bringing so much to the workplace because of how life has been over the last year. It's not to say that your gig worker may not also have those kinds of concerns or background which you wouldn't know about. and you have to stay on top of that. And again, I'm not against it. I'm for it because it's needed. And regardless of whether an HR person is against it or not, it's here. And we have to address it. We have to address it. What's required from an employer or an owner? It's to embrace the change. We want to strive to perpetuate, again, an atmosphere of transparency and respect for all who work in the company. And when I was putting these together, I had to look at it in a total framework because so much of this is what makes you a good employer. So we're not asking you to be a better employer because you have the gig worker in. We're asking you to be the good employer that you are, the good owner that you are, whether you have one person or two, three. You can't, I mean, we talk about solopreneurs, and so often solopreneurs will ask themselves, well, how can I do better? So they're more than one person. There are many persons within their own function, right? But these are the kinds of things that, will help you sustain a harmonious workforce while you have a gig worker, and help you also to ensure that that individual or who they go to next can say that it was great working for you. It was great working for you, because that goes a long way. Even if let me finish this slide. Even in the gig world where they share information about who they worked for, especially if they're in the same industry, you want to make sure that your name is always at the top. Remember, knowledgeable of the differences in the contracts of the gig worker. So this is a situation that I actually had with a client. It was in the medical field, and they brought help desk people in from different agencies, and they all had a different salary, all had a different hourly rate. And it caused a problem because they knew they were doing the same. And it got to the point where they were suggesting, some of them were suggesting, well, maybe I should get out of this contract and go and work with you because that person was paying so much more. It's not the gig worker's fault. And it's not a fault. It is the relationship that you have with your source. So these are the kinds of questions that you would ask. If you're going to look at three, do a salary spread on what they're doing. Make that a determination on, in addition to the skill. If you have the time, you could do it ahead of time though. Make that a determination on what firm you use to bring them in. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do to make sure that you create this atmosphere and you get what you want. I think this is just a summary on some of the things that, I wanted to make sure that we brought to you. And that's review your business model to ensure that you can manage a gig worker and your traditional staff. If not, seek out consultation. Research sources for gig workers so that they are not wasting time when they are needed. Network with other businesses to see how you can share services or recommend workers during this time. We're doing another workshop on another webinar on this. I can't tell you how important this has been for a lot of businesses. The fact that they went out of their comfort zone and networked with other businesses during this time to see what they could share. And ultimately created some gig opportunities for people who they weren't even thinking about gig. They didn't even know anything about gig. They just know that they needed to keep their doors open. And how do we do this? How am I bigger than who I am? And it was through strategic networking that allowed them to do that. Keep informed of changes in HR that will affect your business and may affect your profit. And that a lot of that has to do with benefits. And I would venture to guess, and I know I'm going to do some work on this. I'm going to track gig workers to see, like some Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, how they want to organize. I want to track that to see whether that would be a possibility at this stage. Make sure your employee handbook is up to date and our practices are consistent with consistent in the application, right? I'm sorry. I was thinking of the fact of practices are what you do, sans a handbook. Employee policies and procedures are your law. Okay, so most of us have a lot of practices. Keep in mind that the gig worker wants flexibility, knowing this alerts you to their employment needs. Flexibility is why they're gig workers. And the more you know about how flexible the individual you bring in is, the more you can look at how you can keep them or determine when they leave. And if you have an inkling of the fact that they may be separating, then not separating, but not returning to your project, then you want to have a few available to you. Just like when you recruit for a position, you should have a primary and secondary choice. You should have either a primary resource or secondary resource as well on how this affects, how them leaving affects your business. And I can't stress this enough, not just because I'm there, but I know my colleagues are ardent professionals when it comes to helping our business make these decisions. So reach out to the small business development centers. And if you're not, again, I told you, you get an hour with us. And if you're not with us, then we will definitely refer you to your SBDC to make sure that you get the information that you need. Are there any questions? Anything that anyone would like to share? I think again, we can look at your need. This is just some information on me and how I can be reached. We can look at the need that we have as business owners to ensure that we meet our need to provide the gig workers for our business. And if you're in the process of bringing in someone, you want to make sure that you cover all of your bases for your need. And if the need is temporary, which so many are, you want to make sure that if that occurs again, if the need occurs again, and if that person is someone that you'd like to bring back, make sure you let them know the kind of service that they provided for us. So if there are no questions, I want to thank you for participating in this webinar. Make sure you reach out to us. I'm going to leave this up. I think maybe my team here might have another screen that they want to put up, but definitely thank you so much for being a part of this webinar, and I look forward to hearing from you. Let me see, hold on 1 minute. Is there no questions? I thank you. I thank you so much for what do I really thank you for? I really thank you for understanding the value of this information and knowing how it can help you move your needle. That's my new phrase right now because it's so understandable. And to that, have a great day.
Wow, thank you so much, Jeannie. Thank you for that informative presentation. So again, if you would like to set up a one-on-one appointment with Jeannie, feel free to send us an email on, actually, let me share my screen real fast.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Because that contact information was correct, so.
Okay, good.
Here it is, great.
Good.
Okay, so again, if you are looking for one-on-one consultation with Jeannie, please feel free to reach out to us via the phone number on the screen, the email, or you can also visit our website. And on our website, on the top right-hand corner, there's a button labeled Request Counseling. So you can go to that information and actually specify that you're looking to speak with Jeannie and how you attended the webinar. Okay. So if there are no more questions, we'll now begin ending the webinar. I'm going to stop my screen share just a moment just so I can copy and paste a message into the chat.
Okay.
So what I am actually sharing is the links for our upcoming webinars, as well as our 2 events that are happening this month. So you should see it right now. Okay, so you should see it right now. Those are the links to our website, as well as the events and the webinars that we have going on in the next few weeks. We are actually hosting another webinar directly after this one at 12, including Jeannie will also be one of the, do you not see it? Let me see 12 panelists. Do you see it now? Okay, great. Thank you, Lenine, for letting me know. Thank you. So on the top of that message, we have our website to request counseling, as well as our Eventbrite page where you can actually visit and register for our webinars and the workshops, as well as the events we have going on. So the third link is actually the event that we are hosting directly after this one at 12 p.m. and that will be with Jeannie as well. It is based on a similar topic, navigate business disruption and manage change webinar. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to register for that. Again, that is directly after this one at 12 p.m. We do have 2 special events occurring this month on top of the webinars that we typically host. We have our X the Experts Live virtual open house on March 17th, which is actually on SBDC Day. So this will be a live Q&A on Zoom, and you will be given the opportunity to ask your questions and have them answered live by our experts. So again, this live open house is on March 17th at 10 a.m. and it is the first link with asterisks in the beginning of it. And our second event that we're hosting this month is a virtual Women Entrepreneurs Network, or the acronym is WEN, Tea and Talk on March 25th. Now, this event allows you to meet role models in business and make contact with professional career women who are power brokers in their private or public professional sectors. So if that's something that you're interested in, again, please register for that. And that event link is the second event with the asterisks in the beginning of it. And we do have 2 more events, which is our supply chain webinar, as well as our cybersecurity webinar. So I suggest that you can just copy these links and paste them into a Google document or a Word document, just so you can have these links after the webinar has ended. So please feel free to do that. I also would like to remind you that you all will be receiving a video replay as well as the presentation slides within 24 to 48 business hours. So you can always refer back to this information from Jeannie in the future. When this webinar has ended in the browser, you will see a survey pop up. We would really appreciate it if you can just take a few minutes to complete that. That survey will help us to adjust our presentations as well as give us some information on the kind of assistance you may be needing for your business. So if you have some time to complete that, your feedback is much appreciated. And on that note, we will now end this webinar. I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend today, for participating. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Again, if you're looking for one-on-one consultation with Jeannie, feel free to do that via the contact information on the screen. And we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.